Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty RoundTable Radio Talk Show.
Back with you live, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman, news the networks refuse to use, promoting God, family, and country, protecting life, liberty, and property, doing so in the traditions of our founding fathers. Rejecting revolution, unless it's a Jesus revolution, then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. This is the broadcast for October the 9th in the year of our Lord 2025. Our incredible guest today, Ryan Morgan. He's an author, he's a reporter for the Epoch Times, and he focuses on military and foreign affairs. He basically is covering the UN General Assembly a couple of weeks ago, and the good news about that is he has a breakdown of President Trump's speech. It's an excellent piece on 7 takeaways from Trump's UN speech and discussions with world leaders. Ryan, welcome to Liberty Roundtable Live, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So catch me up a little bit then. The speech at the UN was, let's just call it a United States pivot and game-changing. Is that a starting point?
I think it's fair to say really Trump's presentation at the UN was kind of a reminder that, nation states still have their own interests that are separate from the international community. And I think that was kind of the overriding takeaway of his speech.
And that's why I say that was pivotal, because that usually isn't the case from leaders. They usually kind of just act like they're one of the nation states of this big group that, trumps us all, pardon the pun, but it's not true. And Trump was very appropriately delivering that reality, I guess, right?
Yeah, he presented that in a few different ways. The 3 ones that really stand out to me were, first off, his comments about border security. Nation states are not just it doesn't make sense for nation states to subvert their own national interests and their own border security to take on people from around the world if it's not in their interests. He does it again when he talks about climate change policies. He mentioned, for example, Europe doesn't widely use air conditioning, and their their deaths from heat-related deaths are, I believe it was 173,000 a year. I could be mistaken on the exact figure, but
the number is just shocking, though.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, though, right? I mean, that's really the point.
Right, and he said, we have 1,500 a year. That's a lot. That's tragic. In Europe, it's 173,000. That's orders of magnitude bigger. So he's saying, why is it that our handling of climate change policy, comes down to successful nations are punishing themselves and taking on statistics like that in order to appease kind of this, what he says, this globalist agenda to control the global temperature. And then, the last thing he said is that really stood out to me, and this is a little bit less about kind of the globalism of it all, but he talks about how he was sort of at the forefront of negotiating 7 different peace deals in the last, 9 months now. And he said, where was the UN in all of that? He said they never picked up the phone and called him. And so, these are peace deals that are negotiated kind of primarily in the interests of the United States. If we're leading the peace deal, it's Trump's version of what peace should look like. And that is what it is. But the United Nations hasn't really put in the input. That's at least what he said. And he said, I'm not necessarily against the idea that the United Nations can work together with all the nations of the world and achieve peace. They're just not living up to that. All they seem to do, and his wording is that, they write a really strongly worded letter and then they never follow up on it.
And to make your point, Trump has been working on this ceasefire, which we'll get to a little bit later, but what has the UN really done to promote peace? What have they really done to try to create negotiations? I mean, if this body's really what it says it is, wouldn't they be the ones to be having everybody sit down and go, hold on a minute, we can talk this through? And they don't seem to be providing the leadership at all, and we fund most of the UN, right?
Yeah, I mean, the United States does host the UN. That's for certain. As far as what the United Nations does, I mean, they certainly present themselves as being involved in peace efforts around the world, but it really does require buy-in from a few key countries. Keep in mind the United States is one of the five permanent members of the UN. So really, if we're not interested in the way that the United Nations wants to present peace around the world, we always have an absolute veto power to vote against it. So I mean, there are terms within the UN Charter that make it kind of complicated. It's not a pure democracy between the representatives of each nation. Um, I'm sure you could go through the UN Charter and find things that, okay, like, is this the most effective way to run this international body? But this is something that has always been the case. And so if the United Nations wants to achieve peace deals, they know that they have to do so with the backing of a few key countries, the United States being one of them.
So the headlines kind of came out and said, "Oh my gosh, Trump went crazy. Trump schooled the UN. Trump went, he went off." And what was your take? Do you think it was as bold as it seemed? And do you think that the points he made will? What do you think will be the future with those points?
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to get into the prediction game, because I feel like anyone's predictions just kind of turn into wish casting. I do think that there will be a lasting impact of, at least through the remainder of the Trump presidency. Um, what he said before the UN was kind of consistent with what his administration said earlier this year when I believe it was Pete Hegseth that was addressing NATO. Saying, we have to grapple with the geopolitical realities here, and we have to understand the United States has interests too, and we're going to follow our interests. And when those interests are aligned with other countries, great. But we're prioritizing America first, and that's kind of been Trump's consistent messaging, um, and that's what we saw at the United Nations.
All right. Any other takeaways? I know you had 7 of them in your article. Any other ones to highlight?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of more of a pivot off of the UN speech itself, but as after the speech wrapped up, he was meeting with European leaders. Most importantly, I would say, is Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, and he has definitely ratcheted up the pressure with Russia. He said, if Russian drones or whatever kind of aircraft are crossing over into NATO airspace, yeah, sure, go ahead and shoot them down. And so that is definitely a rhetorical step forward for Trump, to be saying that. Whether or not that materializes into NATO forces actually shooting down Russian aircraft, that remains to be seen. I mean, we did see like a very minor drone incursion where Russian drones passed over into Polish airspace, and those were taken down, but they're unmanned, so it's a different calculation than a manned aircraft. Um, but that definitely is a signal for Russia, and I think that kind of segues into just more of Trump's recent commentary towards Russia, trying to pressure them back towards the negotiating table, not to let them get too far off of that.
And he's really encouraging, as far as I can tell, he's really encouraging the Ukraine to go on offense in that scenario too, right?
Yeah, he his comments towards Ukraine about going on offense came, within a day or two that UN speech, and actually, no, I guess it was the same day. He said, "I think it's feasible for Ukraine to retake its pre-war borders." There's a huge caveat in that statement where he said it will require European support. So he is lining up, the European component of NATO to step up and make it happen if it's going to happen, which I guess might be kind of a call everyone's bluff. If Russia really wants to keep fighting, the fighting can continue, and Ukraine can continue it. But if Ukraine is really serious about retaking its borders, then all the talk from the European members of NATO really has to amount to something.
In other words, it can't be just talk, there's got to be teeth. And I think sometimes what Donald does, this is part of the art of the deal idea, but oftentimes he makes a very extreme statement. And then people kind of wonder, is he really serious about that extreme statement? And then they're willing to kind of come to the table because they don't want that extreme reality to come to pass. And so they kind of say, okay, let's talk. And then he basically has a much more common sense, much more humble plan. Anyway, when we get back, Ryan, you can kind of respond to that, if you will. Ryan Morgan with us, ladies and gentlemen. He's an expert, an author, a reporter for the Epoch Times, ladies and gentlemen. TheEpochTimes.com. He covered the UN General Assembly and President Trump's speech on the EpochTimes.com. And I want to be very clear. His website says author. But what he is talking about is an author of all the articles that he's written for the Epoch Times and articles everywhere. So just understand, article author. He does not have a book that he's promoting. But he did have an excellent piece on the 7 takeaways from Trump's UN speech. After the speech, Trump talked about, hey, encouraging Ukraine to go on offense. I don't want anybody to go on offense. I want everybody to be peaceful. And I just say, no fight, people. Come on, stop. Let's have peace. We can have peace if we try. But these people have been fighting for thousands of years. But Trump is very well known for making a very extreme statement to kind of say, wake up, people. This could go crazy. And then they're like, we don't want it to go crazy. Neither do I. Let's sit down and talk. It's really a strategy more than take him at everything he says. I don't mean to undermine the president in those kind of statements, but I'm trying to put reality to a lot of what he does. Is this a fair assessment, Ryan, or what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely think that has borne out in past events. We've seen that to be Trump's sort of style of negotiation, where he certainly has a capacity to do some pretty profound things on the national, or on, I guess, on the foreign policy diplomacy stage, whether that's military action, whether that's historic deals. So that possibility is always there, and I think it always keeps people on their toes that Trump could do something. When he's talking about military action, we've seen boats blowing up in the South Caribbean. He can certainly back up a lot of the statements he does make, and so I think it does keep people around the world guessing at, okay, is he serious about doing it this time or not? And you never know, so you always have to bake that into the equation as you're dealing with Trump. And I think that's been his style for sure.
And I really think that hopefully helps people come to the table in ways that they haven't been willing to before. Trump now says the U.S. is seeking to regain control. And how do you say this? Bagram, is that how you say it? Air base in Afghanistan. He wants to get control of that or whatever. And that's very interesting. That's not something that's on most people's radar, but I think it's pivotal.
Yeah, the Bagram Air Base. That was kind of the central component of the U.S. I guess occupation, the U.S. mission in Afghanistan for that 20-year adventure that we did. It is kind of a he has definitely talked about regaining control or access to Bagram before this. This is kind of the latest iteration in the last couple weeks that he's talked about it, and it is kind of it's an interesting thing to throw out there, because what does it really mean? The Taliban currently effectively they control most of the country, to the extent that you can govern a country like Afghanistan. They're largely in control of it. They're in control of the area around Bagram. So it becomes a question of, okay, under what terms can we have this air base back? Is this, we're going to fight our way in and create an air bridge where this is our little security bubble inside Afghanistan where we control it? Or are we going to make some kind of arrangement with the Taliban where we're not fighting you guys anymore, we can make peace, let us use the air base? And then it becomes a question of, okay, well, what is that air base for? There's a few things that Trump mentioned. The one specific thing he mentioned is that this part of Afghanistan is located about an hour away from where a lot of the Chinese nuclear program is set up. This is in, I guess, Western China, the Xinjiang province. I'm sure I butchered that, but Western China is kind of this desertous region where they do work on their nuclear program, and it's also where the Uyghur population is. In large part, a lot of them are detained in these detention camps. So Trump is saying that he wants this to, I guess, kind of keep an eye on China might be one component of it. The other thing is Afghanistan is not terribly far away from Iran. So does that potentially mean, he wants to fly, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance aircraft up as close as he can to Iranian airspace from that direction? That could potentially be a thing. But I think we need a little bit more detail about what exactly Trump is proposing in terms of getting this airbase under U.S. control first before we can really assess what he can achieve once it is under U.S. control.
Fleshing out the details, as you wisely point out, needs to happen, no question. But the fact that it repeatedly keeps being brought up tells me that it's not a passing statement. It is an effort by the Trump administration. What that looks like, well, Trump has ran on a peace kind of platform. He was going to back away from a lot of the wars. He was going to negotiate and create kind of discussions and see if we can't peacefully resolve a lot of these issues. So far, it hasn't turned out that way as much as he had talked about. At the same time, right now, celebration follows Trump's brokered ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. I wonder if we're celebrating too early, though, as well. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, one thing I would say is right now we are putting together phase one of a ceasefire deal in Gaza, and I want your audience to know we were in phase one of a ceasefire deal for Gaza back in January. We entered it. It was primarily brokered with
And Trump even basically kind of talked out of turn a little bit and said it was done, and it wasn't, right?
right. Well, I mean, phase one was implemented, and that first phase of that deal involved Hamas handing over hostages back to Israel. They did that part, and then things really broke down as it became a question of okay, that plan back in January had three phases. We've done phase one with the hostage release of that number of hostages in that phase. Do we now go to phase two, or do we extend phase one? That's where things really broke down and that deal collapsed. So now, as we start this new ceasefire deal that is also supposed to be multi-phase, my understanding is it's a two-phase deal. But as we get into this new deal, where we're in phase one, where it involves Hamas handing over all of the remaining hostages and Israel backing up to a set demarcation line within Gaza for the first phase. The question becomes, okay, what are the guardrails in place? What are the assurances in place that keep us moving towards phase two rather than it collapsing partway through? So that if you're hesitant to believe that the deal is just going to work out as advertised, I think that's a fair degree of skepticism based on what we know from history.
Well, and these people have been literally fighting for thousands of years, right? Let's not kid ourselves. And I personally think it would be best for us to stay out of the foreign entanglements. I'm kind of a George Washington-esque kind of Ron Paul guy, in the sense that I believe we could do a whole lot more by exporting the Constitution, by diplomatically working with people, by discussing, by the art of the deal, if you will, by peace efforts. And I think we can do a lot more with that than a lot of the ways we're going about it, at least over the last many decades in the United States. I think we, to some degree, become really part of the problem and a stumbling block. We seem to arm one side, and then we seem to, this and that. And it seems like we have a very schizophrenic policy. Hopefully, Trump can bring common sense to that.
Yeah, as far as the schizophrenia of U.S. foreign policy, yeah, I mean, we have an opportunity at least every 4 years to change our mind about stuff. Not to mention just every president is entitled to change his mind as well. midway through his administration. And you're right. I mean, this is a long, protracted conflict. I was talking with a coworker earlier this morning. And she was saying, this is a really historic deal. And I was like, well, okay, let's put this in context. This is resolving a 2-year conflict that's set within a 60-year standoff between the Israeli and Palestinian community, set within a hundreds, thousands
We've been
year long.
fighting with everybody for millennia.
Right. So keep that in context. If the seas, I don't like hearing about people being blown up and dying in the hundreds and thousands.
Amen.
So if it works out, that's great. I want that to work out. I mean, I don't necessarily generally share my opinions about stuff foreign policy wise, but I think it's an uncontroversial thing to say. I want there to be peace and people not to die. Trump says it often. I want the dying to stop. So,
And I think one of
yeah,
the big ways to do that is not to pick sides, though, not to say somebody's got the complete upper hand, to say, look, there's problems on all sides of this thing. And whether it be rogue agents in different groups or no matter, I'm not here to debate all that. I'm just here to say, look, we've got to realize that you can't blame one party and expect to get a negotiation underway.
right. Let's going back to Trump's UN speech where he said, I negotiated seven peace deals, ended 7 wars, and the UN wasn't a part of it. Keep in mind, those deals are negotiated in a way that's beneficial to the United States, or at least in line with Trump's policy preferences. And if we want a more balanced arrangement with all the countries around the world, they need to get involved too.
Roger that. Ryan Morgan, thank you so much, my friend. We'll have you back soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
He's an author. He writes articles. He didn't write a book, but he writes articles for Epoch Times, ladies and gentlemen. He covered the UN General Assembly, and he's a well-known reporter for the Epoch Times, focusing on military and foreign affairs. There you have it, the epochtimes.com. Great folks in the business, truth tellers, to say the least. I'm Sam Bushman. We are syndicated by Loving Liberty Networks, lovingliberty.net. Spread the word, share the love. Back in seconds. Following the Trump brokered peace deal, ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, I pray for that. I agree with the Epoch Times reporter, Ryan Morgan, on this. Keep an eye on his work. He does a great job, by the way. Coastal Family Church. They're of Flagler Beach, Florida, ladies and gentlemen. They're now facing a lawsuit. Why? Because they held a worship service in their church. I kid you not. They bought a unit that was purchased at Flagler Square. It's a strip mall, and there's 4 units in the strip mall, I guess. They had a discount national brand retail store. They had a resale consignment store. They had the Fraternal Order of Police in this building, and they had this church. Well, Flagler Square JX Inc., I guess it's called, or JAX Inc. It's a condominium association, folks, that governs the, quote, mall that this place is at, alleges the church having services violate a, quote, prohibited use clause in the condominium declaration. So these guys are rioting and suing the church now for holding church services. It's absolutely insanity. The clause, they say, disallows uses such as banquets and public assemblies, although other tenants hold similar events, like the Fraternal Order of Police, etc. Liberty Counsel, our dear friends, who have been formed 36 years ago. They've been in the business for a long time. They will represent the church, citing Florida law against enforceable restrictions that violate civil rights and religious freedom. Liberty Counsel, as you know, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing religious freedom, the sanctity of human life, and the family. They're headquartered in Orlando, Florida, by the way. They have additional offices in Virginia and in Washington, D.C. They do a tremendous work over at Liberty Council. Anyway, bottom line, churches being shut down can't worship because you violate these equivalents of an HOA, right? It's like a homeowners association, but it's like this business condo association or guidelines, bylaws, whatever. I don't know what words you use in every state. The words are different, but the principles are the same. They call them in homeowners associations. To me, they're like the Nazis. I kid you not. They're like the neighborhood Nazis. Why do they have a problem with these people worshiping in their own church? What harm is it causing? I don't really understand it. We benefit in society when people go to church, when people worship the Lord, when people pray, when people talk about God, family, and country. Everyone wins, even if you don't believe in their religious theology. Even if the keys to theology are different in your mind than in their minds. I don't even know what religion these guys are in terms of, are they evangelicals? Are they Judeo-Christians? Are they Southern Baptists? Are they, I don't know. It's called the Coastal Family Church of Flagler Beach, Florida. I don't know what their religion, but I'm saying, why can't they worship? Why can't they turn to their God in peace? This is where we've got to stand up, my fellow Americans, in the culture war. And thank God for people like Liberty Council, lc.org, a nonprofit doing a phenomenal job. I've been interviewing people from the Liberty Council, and one of the leaders, Matt Staver, has been a friend for a long time. Great people doing great things. Now, the people opposing the church and opposing the Southern Poverty Law Center, in addition to this Flagler Square JX, I don't know what you want to call it, HOA Gestapo kind of group, the Southern Poverty Law Center weighs in and says, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Can't be promoting religion. And okay, the SPLC has been so discredited, folks, it's not even funny. 20 plus state attorney generals said they're not to be trusted. Now the Justice Department hopefully will break ties with the SPLC, but the FBI already has. So there you have that. Switching gears now, Joe Rogan's in the news with the Joe Rogan Experience. You know, Joe Rogan drops a lot of F-bombs, and I'm disappointed in that, but he does do a lot of good. Joe Rogan rightly criticized the decision to place former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard on a, quote, suspected terrorist watch list. Rogan's comments followed 2024, that's the date, not the number, by the way, whistleblowers, revelations that the, quote, Transportation Security Administration, or the TSA, and federal air marshals under the Biden administration had surveilled Tulsi Gabbard under the, quote, Quiet Skies program during the Biden administration. So they had a Quiet Skies program. They basically put Tulsi on this no-fly list. They harassed her. They attacked her. Joe's speaking out saying this is a disgrace. He emphasized Gabbard's 8-year tenure in Congress and her military service. And he rightly called for consequences, legal consequences, for those who added her to the no-fly list. The Trump administration, to their credit, discontinued the Quiet Skies program in June. Homeland Security leader or Secretary Kristi Noem basically stated, hey, the program was misused politically by the Biden administration. Now, so if that's true, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that Christie's right about this. It is true. They misused their power. But I agree with Joe Rogan. When are people going to jail? This is where Trump, Christie, Cash, Dan, all you people, let's double down. Okay? If the program was misused by the previous administration for political purposes, I don't know what misused means. I don't know how legal misuse gets. That's why I'm kind of problematic language here. You've got to double down. Is it criminal? Okay. There needs to be legal consequences. Why did they add her to the list? Was there really a justification, or was it a political hit? Like the IRS has been used by Lois Lerner and others for political hits to change the game between liberals and conservatives and play partisan politics between parties and such. Okay. Whistleblower revelations show that the TSA and the federal air marshals, they literally wrongfully put her on this list. Who made the decision? Who's playing politics? Who needs to go to prison? I don't know. I'm just saying that's what I'm talking about here. Is like, what is happening? When are we going to have truth to power? When are we going to really get to the bottom of a lot of this stuff, right? When are we really going to say enough is enough? And so I really appreciate Joe Rogan for speaking out about this. The whistleblower revelations show that the TSA, think about that. I don't even understand how the TSA can get away with this. Like, did the Biden administration just say, you're going to put this person on the list? How did they get her name? How do they decide to target her? Who did it? The federal air marshals? I don't know if you know, but the federal air marshals is called the FAM, Federal Air Marshals, right? They all had surveilled Tulsi Gabbard under the, quote, Quiet Skies program. Who gave the orders? Who is responsible? See, that's the problem. We want to say, you know, in the media, oh, this person was bad. This person misused. This person, what? I'm grateful for the Trump administration discontinuing this bogus program. But I'm also kind of saying, it's one thing to stop the program. It's one thing to release the people from January 6th. But it's not going near far enough. Who did this? Who put this former congresswoman, this former veteran, now a servant, if you will, in the Trump administration, Tulsi Gabbard, right? Who put her on the list? Anyway, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's I don't know how to drive home to the American people more seriously this topic. What do we do? Do we just dismiss it? Do we just let it go and just be like, oh, they misused their power. They caused her problems. They besmirched her character. They created libel and slander against her with this kind of effort. They violated the checks and balances of the Constitution. They basically used a political hit on her. Joe Rogan is right. The Trump administration is right to shut that down, the Quiet Skies program, because it was used for political purposes. It was misused. But I don't like the misused term because there's no criminal activity with misused. I believe criminal activity happened here. And I believe there needs to be legal consequences. And I'm agreeing with Joe Rogan 1,000%. When are we going to get something done, huh? Hang tight, Sam Bushman. In seconds, we talk about Whoopi. In my opinion, she's just off the rails. But you know what? I'm entitled to my opinion. Some might love what she had to say and do. But here's the problem. Whoopi Goldberg goes full racist and tells people to wear Latino face at the Super Bowl with an effort to confuse ICE. I joke not. They say she's joking. I don't think so. I don't know that you joke about that kind of stuff. People's lives are in the balance here. Here's Whoopi, then we'll talk about it.
She's threatening to go to the Super Bowl when Bad Bunny is there and round up all these people that are illegal immigrants. Do you think that she would go if it was Garth Brooks or Eminem or Taylor Swift or any other white person?
Let me understand what you're saying, because she's going to go to the Super Bowl and round up. How's she going to know who's who?
Because the Supreme Court has given permission to question anyone who has a Spanish accent, who has a dark skin.
Yeah. So here's
That's why.
Thing. Here's the thing. Everybody get a little cocoa butter, sit in the sun. That's the first thing. and this is the only time you can probably ever do this, give yourself a Latin accent.
You know, Whoopi, that is such a good idea.
And see if she can tell who's who.
Okay, I know it's a joke, but at the end they said it's a very good idea. They're responding to Kristi Noem saying, look, Bad Bunny's going to the Super Bowl. going to do his whole act in Spanish, mocking Americans, saying, if you don't understand, learn some Spanish. And then the Trump administration, through Kristi Noem, saying, we're going to be there too. So, you might get arrested. Well, the story is Bad Bunny has refused to do concerts in the United States, saying, I don't want ICE to be at my concerts and arrest people. And well, now Bad Bunny going to the Super Bowl. And now these ladies are just off the rails. I mean, think about the racist statements they made. They went full racist right there. They're like, hey, man, put some, I don't know, cocoa butter on your face. Go ahead and go out in the sun. Try to adopt an accent that's a Latino accent and stuff like that. And I mean, it's literally full racist. So they've been abusing us forever, saying anybody who wore blackface was an evil person. How dare you? Even a little kid. Somebody likes LeBron James. They're a white kid. They love the basketball player. So for Halloween, they roll out and they dress up like LeBron James. And then they get busted as 30 years later because they're a politician or they're an executive of something. It's like, oh my gosh, you, when you were 7, wore blackface because you wanted to be like LeBron James. And they went all psychotic on that back in the day. And now they're literally telling people to go Latino face. They're literally telling people, adopt a Latino accent. Now, you could say it was a joke, but what if I made a joke like that? What if I said, hey, man, you need it, and I just threw racial whatever in there? How well would that go over? They wouldn't say Sam's joking. They would say, see, Sam pulls out his KKK cape. Sam goes crazy. See, it's not true. They love to divide in this country. Don't accept it. Don't believe it. If you're here illegally, you ought not be here. And I don't know that they're going to go and listen to people's accents or hear people speaking Spanish and go up and profile them and say, oh, golly, you're getting arrested. I don't think they'll do that. I do think what they're trying to do is send a warning that, don't go to a Bad Bunny concert. You're not here in the United States to have entertainment. If you're here illegally, it's time for you to go. And everywhere you go, if you're illegal, we're going to have to discuss your status. And when you look at Bad Bunny and rap and Spanish and the kind of underworld groups of people that hang around these kind of musicians, at some point you go, it might be a great place to find some illegals. What level they'll go to or what lengths they'll go to might be a concern. I agree. But let's not just start that way on The View. That's not fair or honorable. Now, some people are saying, fire Whoopi, cancel The View. Well, if the company decides to do that individually, that's fine. But I don't want government to suppress their free speech. Even though I think Whoopi's off her rock, I defend her right to say it. But she's just shown you how racist she really is. She's just shown you how she can mock people because of the colors of their skin. Hey, white people, put cocoa butter on your face. Go out and get a big old tan. Try to practice your accent, says stuff like that. So do I believe these people belong on TV? No, I don't. It's a waste of time. But you don't do it by using government force to kick her off or whatever. The company should fire Whoopi and put the money into people like me and others, if you want my opinion. But let's let the market decide. Everybody should be turning off The View. Everybody should be saying, you know what? These ladies have gone too far. They're just nuts. And if you turn them off and the ratings go down, your voice matters, my fellow Americans. The Treasury Department's in the news, folks. And the Treasury Department is now defending its decision to mint a, quote, $1 coin featuring both sides with President Trump's likeness on it. There's controversies about this because of an 1866 law. I joke not. It's a 1866 law prohibiting living individuals from being depicted on U.S. currency. Why? Well, this law was intended to prevent the appearance of a monarchy. Makes sense to me. The coin is creating controversy because it's being linked to America's 250th celebration. The Treasury Department argued that the circulating collectible coin redesign act of 2020 allows for such a design to go forward because, well, they call it part of the semi-quincentennial. I don't know how to say that really. Celebration, saying that President Trump's image is emblematic for this occasion. I understand that, and I don't disagree. They say the design feature has Trump's profile on one side, and on the reverse, it depicts President Donald J. Trump with his fist in front of an American flag like he raised it when he experienced the assassination attempt. However, the legality of the coin is in question due to the 2020 law and its prohibition of living individuals on the reverse side of coins. Anyway, they say we might have to have the courts involved. Oh boy, it's just crazy town, right? Anyway, I got a way that Trump can solve this whole problem. Don't do a fake dollar coin that's in circulation. Do that same coin, President Trump. But you know how you have the silver eagle silver dollars that are a real dollar? Because they're constitutional currency? You would be better to create an equivalent to the silver eagle silver dollar. And you ought to put the silver eagle on the front, President Trump, and on the back, you ought to put you with your fist up. And then it becomes a real dollar. It's not a, quote, circulating fiat currency. It's actually really real money. And then you could abolish the Federal Reserve. And then your name would be etched on a coin forever, ladies and gentlemen. All right, Brady Judd spoke out boldly about how Chicago was undermining ICE. Here's his comments.
Never heard of one law enforcement agency not helping another when they call for help until this weekend, when a chief of patrol, where the Chicago Police Department instructed the police officers not to run in and help their colleagues who were calling for help, who were under attack by a bunch of people clearly violating the law. That's scary. Let me give you the antithesis of that. We had a single man resist ICE agents and get away from them in our community. We sent a helicopter, a drone, K9, and 50 law enforcement officers to surround an area, and we found that guy who violently resisted ICE, and we locked him up in jail where he should have been. If you allow anarchists and criminals to run wild in your community, people will die. People will be shot. Now, let me say this. For other law enforcement leaders across this state and nation, you need to be standing up saying the same exact thing that I am. Because when you have a breakdown of the rule of law, when you allow anarchists, criminals to take over the streets and attack law enforcement officers and then not send them help, that's a slippery slope, a real slippery slope.
Boy, howdy, is the sheriff spot on that, ladies and gentlemen. We've got to realize you may not be forced to help. Richard Mack's Supreme Court case win over the Trump or the Clinton administration highlights this. They don't have to participate as local groups, governments, state and local, but they don't have to help, or they can choose sides. They can either help or not help. They can choose that. What they can't do is run interference. And what they should not do is betray their fellow law enforcement officers when there's a call for help. That's just my 2 cents. I'm Sam Bushman, lovingliberty.net. God save our republic.